Aida, Michelle, thank you for joining me on this call. On this call, we're going to explore probably the most troubling symptoms of anxiety for people. So we're going to talk about depersonalization, derealization, and intrusive thoughts. And the reason I wanted to do this video call is because you guys were telling me that in your one-to-one sessions that people are bringing this up very, very frequently, maybe even more so in recently. So before we start, I suppose I should tell you, when I was suffering from anxiety, a sense of unreality, or not depersonalization, but more that derealization was the symptom I struggled most with. It was that really, really sensation that I feared would not go away. And I was trying to think earlier today why I was so scared of it. And I think it was because it felt like evidence to me. It felt like evidence that I was going mad and that I would never get over this. It was so weird. And I think the only other time I had maybe experienced something like it was when I was younger, when I had smoked cannabis, and I had that weird kind of detached sensation. And I think it does something similar like that. And it causes lots and lots of anxiety, lots of uncomfortable feelings, because you think it won't go away and I'm going to be stuck like this forever, and it's going to get worse, and something worse is going to happen after this. So I want to have a good conversation with you guys about your experience talking with people one-to-one. But before I do, I'm going to read off from the Mayo Clinic how they define these things. So first of all, depersonalization, because there'll be people who are watching who won't have experienced it and maybe aren't too sure what we're talking about. So symptoms of depersonalization include feelings that you're outside observing your thoughts, feelings, your body, or parts of your body. For example, if you were floating in air or above yourself. Feeling like a robot, that you're not in control of your speech or movements. I remember that one myself. I remember feeling it was weird that I was just looking, being able to look or see was kind of a weird sensation. The sense that your body, legs, or arms appear distorted, enlarged, or shrunken, or that your head is wrapped in cotton. Emotional or physical numbness of your senses or responses to the world around you, and a sense that your memories lack emotion and that they may not be your own memories. So that was depersonalization. And then derealization symptoms include feelings of being alienated from or unfamiliar with your surroundings. For example, like you're living in a movie or a dream. Now that's the one I kind of hear online most from people, is that sensation of being in a dream or like a glass wall in front of you. Feeling emotionally disconnected from people you care about, as if you were separated from them by a glass of wall. And I think with this one also ties in that fear of, do I love them anymore? This kind of stuff creeps in as well. Like everything feels so robotic, and, do I love this person? Do I connect with this person anymore? Surroundings that appear distorted, blurry, colorless, or two-dimensional, and lack clarity. And then distortions in perception of time, such as recent events feeling like in the distant past, and distortions of distance and the size and shape of objects. So I thought that was a good list because it covers lots of people experience this in different ways. We'll start with you, Michelle. Does that ring a bell with the people you've spoken to?
Oh, yeah. And, it's unfortunate because it's always only, well, not so much lately on the group calls, because I try and talk about it more, because people book a one-to-one call because they're like, this is the one that makes me really think I'm going crazy. Between depersonalization, derealization, they're like, I know heart palpitations is anxiety, but the other thing is I don't hear a lot about it. That's what people say. There's not a lot of information out there. Like, you kind of have to dig a little deeper to find that stuff. And it's not right. It's because it's such a common thing, and people are booking one-to-one calls because they're like, this is anxiety, but now I'm feeling this. This must really mean I'm about to go crazy because I feel disconnected. And crazy people are disconnected. That's kind of the line I always hear. And I'm so aware of how I'm detached from myself. That's their biggest concern, and reassurance. Am I okay? Is this crazy? Is this a problem? Like, what? This can't just be anxiety, right? And
Yeah.
that's kind of the bulk of those messages. Either everything seems weird, and it's one of those things that it's always hard to explain. I can have 100 people call me and they explain it in 100 different ways, and it's always like, it's hard to explain. It's kind of like this weird, like you're here, but you're not here, and you're connected and you're not. And I know, are these my hands? Right? Who's speaking? Is this me? How am I walking? And it's not only that, it feels weird and disconnected, but you're so aware of how disconnected you are. That seems to be, the theme of the calls.
Aida, would you concur? And didn't you also experience these sensations? Am I right?
Yes, I did, repeatedly, intensely, and I really do understand why, sorry, why they freak people out that much. When I experienced that, it was after going through a phase of high anxiety and not having actually coping mechanisms. I didn't know what it was. I mean, this is, I don't know, 15 years ago or something. And to me, it felt the only thing I could describe is like, I'm feeling like I'm losing myself. Like, I don't know who I am anymore. Like, I couldn't grab my sense of self anymore. And I didn't know a better way to explain it, but I just knew that this was the creepiest shit I have ever felt. Sorry. It was awful. And when I asked later, a few years later, when I asked a therapist about it, because my main fear, of course, my inference was, okay, I am going nuts, right? And she was like, well, not yet, but we're getting there. Okay. And that was for me, like, this was my death sentence. I completely lost any motivation or hope to ever get better, right? And this is the first thing I want to address is the inference we attach to it. We assign this danger to it for us when we feel that way, because it's not a feeling we feel frequently. We know heart palpitations, right? When you run, or we get nauseous from time to time. We have insomnia from time to time. But feeling detached from yourself, feeling like you're split in two parts, a part that acts and a part that observes, this is very scary, and it's just not a usual experience. And many people, they never do drugs or anything like that. Or of course this can happen when you're overly tired, but then you don't know what it is. You don't have a label. You have to say, okay, this is how DP or DR feels like. So I think the lack of understanding and knowledge also with therapists and doctors is a major contributor to people, to their fear of losing their mind and going crazy. So I'm very happy we are doing this talk, and I hope many people watch it, so they can know, or they get to experience that they are not alone, first of all, and that as very, very, very scary as this feels, it is in fact not dangerous. And yeah, I would like, Barry, if that's okay, to tell people, first of all, that DP and DR are coping mechanism, and it uses dissociation. Like when stress gets too high, when emotions are too overwhelming and you don't have anything to cope with that. For example, you haven't used DIR, okay? So you have frequent panic attacks. You don't know what to do with it, right? You don't have any strategy or tool to work with that. And you keep spiraling down, and then your brain like tries to protect you from this overwhelm of feelings. And it creates this like anesthetic, right? Like emotional anesthetic. So it's not dangerous. The short-term advantage of this is to function in situations where you have high anxiety, because you still do take care of your kids. You go to work, you go get a shower, you eat, you drink. So you are functioning, though you feel so utterly cut off from everything. So that's the short-term advantage. But the long-term disadvantage is that it numbs all the other feelings. And this is where everything starts, with a sensation. But then, and this is what Michelle always says, then comes the fight of it. And I would like to take that back to Michelle.
Yeah, and just on the biology side of it, so it's nice to know there's a reason behind it. There's a biological mechanism there. And, you know, our biology doesn't really care about how we feel. It just cares about keeping us alive. So it's like you're able to function in that kind of numb state, but then your anxious mind gets so upset by these thoughts, these sensations that come with it. And yeah, you can function, but it feels so terribly unpleasant. And that's where people get caught up, is with that feeling that it leaves behind, that kind of echo it leaves after it.
Right. Yeah. Kind of like when your body goes into shock if like you hear terrible news, somebody died, and like you hear the noise, like you hear the words, but you're like, oh, okay. And there's almost like a wall, like, you know, it's like, I'm not sad, you're just kind of numb, right? And because like it's almost like your body knows that's too much. Like that's too much to handle. So so basically your body does this, right? Everything going on in here is too much because, I'm so anxious. Michelle, if you just give me 5 minutes of peace, please help me. My thoughts, my body, my sensations, my worries, my what if. So your alarm is there to protect you. So it goes, okay, I'm going to protect her from herself. So let's put like a barrier. Okay. So when can you even hear me with my head in here? Does it sound
Leave
weird?
it on. Leave it on. We want to see it.
So now this is protecting you from here, but you're seeing this and you're like, oh, what's this? What's this box? I sound weird. I feel, is this real? Am I doing things? So you're walking around as if you're in this, and then you're fighting your own protective mechanism. So here's your alarm protecting you from yourself, right? And you're fighting that. Here's a pane of glass. Here's a plastic box on my head that I just found in the basement. Here's a box. And then we fight that, and your alarm sees you're fighting. So we put another box on top. Now I feel even more disconnected. And the more connected you try and feel, the more you notice how disconnected you are. The more, wow, how are my hands moving? Let's look at them more closely. Let's look at them more closely. Let's look until we're so zoomed in on trying to not have that feeling. The more you fight it, the more this part of you helps you fight it and then protects you from what you're fighting. So it becomes this whole paradox people get stuck in.
Yeah. And so with Dare, at the core of it is let's normalize all of these unusual sensations, all of this discomfort. So, the first thing we're trying to even do on this call is to normalize that experience for people, saying it's normal, this happens, and these are the reasons it happens. Like high stress, high anxiety causes it, trauma causes it, and your body reacts to that and responds to that. Mind responds.
Yeah, and I would also like to add that it's like a phobia of feelings, right? Like the cause of it. I don't want to feel, I can't feel this. This is too much. This is going to push me over the edge. I don't want to feel this. So the more I resist the anxiety, the more I get disconnected. And what I always tell my parents, my clients, my God, not my parents. What I always tell my clients is, you do not need to worry about the DP or try, because they're like, how can we tackle this, right? What can we do so I can overcome this? And I always tell them, we're not trying to overcome this because this is just a reaction. It's not the cause. The cause is that your high anxiety you are not dealing with and you are pushing away. Right. So this happens, and now you have another reason to fight. Now you have another reason to be anxious. So you start here. You start with your anxiety. This is just a reaction. It will take care of itself as soon as you manage this.
Right. Yeah. And also to add to biology, when we kind of forget to talk about this sometimes on the calls, but we talk about that fight or flight response when there's real danger, and like we know the usuals, right? The heart racing, right? The clenched stomach, that rush of adrenaline. But we forget, like, our pupils dilate when we're about to be attacked by a lion, right? Lets in more light. That's just part of that response. So if there's real danger, that's great, because all of that, if you're focused on the danger, you kind of have tunnel vision. But when there's no danger and you just have that reaction and you're standing outside and everything looks so weird, you're like, what's going on? Because if there was a fire, you wouldn't really care that everything else looked weird. You care about the fire because there's no actual danger to focus on. You're in this heightened state and everything just seems so weird. And the more you try and make it feel better, the more you just notice how it feels.
Yeah. So we know what it is. We were talking about normalizing it, and now let's talk about, so what are the concrete steps people can do when this manifests? And it just hits you on Tuesday afternoon out of the blue. You're driving the car and suddenly that feeling comes over you. So, my opinion is the second step of Dare is probably the most effective step here. This is that real step of accepting and allowing this state, not fighting it, not resisting it, as you've been mentioning there. And it's really about how long can you spend with this discomfort? How long can you sit with this discomfort in that second step of always allowing, always inviting it in, without doing it as a tool to push it away, without that being the agenda of, okay, I'll do this step as long as I feel better within half an hour or an hour or so. And it's a tricky one. And would you agree, this is where people get caught up the most, is they'll tell you, yeah, I'm accepting this, but it's just not going away. Is that your experience?
Oh yeah, 100%. And that's, I mean, that's kind of how everything works with anxiety, right? We can take this exact recording, even though it's all about depersonalization, derealization, intrusive thoughts, and just change the words to heart palpitations or dizziness or something else. It's the fight of what you're trying to get rid of. Anxiety is in the fight of. So it's learning how to not, it's not the discomfort that you're feeling. This discomfort on this call just happens to be this whole disassociated, disconnected sort of feeling. And if you're doing Dare and say, it's not gone yet, oh, Michelle, but it's still here, but it still feels, you're fighting how it feels. You're just fighting this weird feeling. I've been telling people this last, I don't know, week or so, I'm like, start telling a boring story, because we tell a very detailed story of exactly how it feels. Look, Michelle, here's this feeling that's still here. And Dare is, it's not the Dare feeling elimination method, it's the Dare response. It's how we respond to the feelings we're trying to get rid of. And it's learning how to not get rid of. So it's tell a boring story. I just feel weird right now. Like, what's actually happening? So that's diffuse, right? Just feel weird. Oh, well is a response of doing nothing, right? To me, that's my accept and allow. Like, notice it, shrug your shoulders, and leave it alone. You know, let it be. And if you feel the need to do something about it, right? If you're saying, I accept and allow for like 12 hours a day, not. Accept and allow is passive. I don't care if Michelle got a black shirt on. I don't care, you know, whatever. But if you do care, that's run towards. Okay, well, I feel weird. I could feel even more weird. I can feel even weirder. That's not danger. It just feels weird. I can feel weird while I engage, right? I can feel weird while I cook dinner. I can feel weird while I'm watching my kids at the playground. I don't have to feel connected. I can just notice how I feel. So that's when how I go through the steps of Dare when I talk to somebody that's dealing with this.
Yeah, and I think it's always good to point out where people do get caught up with this. So Aida, when you were experiencing these uncomfortable sensations, what do you think you were doing wrong before you knew the right response? And what was making things worse for you? Do you remember?
I actually wasn't doing anything because I had nothing to do with it. I had no tools, I had no strategies with it. So I was like more like paralyzed by it. So when it came to me, it felt like I'm dropping dead mentally somehow, you know, not physically. And so then, as with panic attacks and anxiety in general, it peaked and then it subsided and then I felt okay again. But then of course this fear set in and I was like, oh my God, what if this comes back? What if this comes back, right? But I was younger back then, so I had a lot of things to engage in. But now what I always tell my clients is look at your inference. What kind of danger are you assigning to it? Because this is so important in my opinion. So when people feel derealized or depersonalized, my inference is I'm going to go mad.
Yeah.
This must mean I'm this. And the problem is, though we understand this intellectually, we have this strong fusion to this thought that it, especially in the beginning of practicing Dare, it is almost impossible to distance yourself from it. So there is the sensation or just the memory of that sensation. And there comes the inference immediately. It's like this one link. I'm having a sensation. This means I'm going mad. And you're going to have that whoosh, that zap, right? And in the beginning, it's like this. It's so tight. And the only thing you can do is just remind yourself in that moment, oh, okay, I understand this is DP. So I remind myself what I'm experiencing and that it's not dangerous, though it feels dangerous. And I do this repeatedly. And with practice in time, what I'm going to feel is that, oh, a thought is actually creating this. Like I'm thinking of something, oh, there was that memory. Maybe I still feel a whoosh, still a zap, but at least I'm able to have this tiny gap where I can observe where it comes from. And with more practice and with more time, you can distance yourself more from it. And then your nervous system gets a chance to desensitize. And then it's easier and easier. But the most important thing is understanding, really understanding what this is, and then slowly but surely starting to not fear it every day a little less. It's really a process. I think, especially with depersonalization and derealization, and more especially with depersonalization, it's such a danger you assign to it immediately, because it goes to the very core of your being. It's different than palpitations. It's different than fear of vomiting. It's different than anything. It's really because what many of my clients remark, and what I have experienced as well, like I could be totally normal and feel totally okay, and in a split second I could feel so eerily cut off that it was like going from 0 to 200, and it was that kind of intensity. Like, how could you not feel you are going mad? So I totally understand that this bothers people, and it's really hard for them, but it's definitely doable. And going back to what you said, Barry, really 100% accepting it. And I do little exercises with my clients where we write down what is my inference. Okay, I'm going to go mad, I'm going to go crazy, I'm going to start screaming at people, I'm going to do something, la la. So we write that down, and we slowly start to accept that thought, right? Accept it in, allow it in, using visualization. So when this thought comes up, I'm opening the door, I'm giving it a hug, or whatever it is. But slowly but surely, this is how you lose the fear of it.
Yeah. That's really what you're fighting, the fear, because I like talking about this stuff on the group calls, because that was never my thing. I know what that feels like, because I just have a normal body like everybody else, but I felt those, like, we all feel each other's things. Like, we've all, like, you might not care about nausea, but that was my thing, right? My stomach. What if I throw up? What if I get sick? I felt that weird, disconnected sort of feeling. I don't really give a shit about it. So there was no fear. I fought other things. So it's always like what you're fighting. It's never what you're actually fighting. So that's why, like, I try and like normalize that sensation too, because there was no fear. When I feel those feelings out of the blue, I'm just like, oh, well, look at that. That's weird. Wow. Like, that's so cool. Almost like, I don't know how my hand is moving. But when the fear is what like magnifies it, fear feels important. Fear protects us from danger. So if I'm doing something and I feel fear, I automatically assign danger to that thing. So for me, I just assign danger to something else. This is just the one, like, I never really can't, like, what if I go crazy? My automatic response was, whatever, but what if I throw up? So that's why it's not to, like, when I, like, this is what hooks people so much, because it's like, well, if you get sick, you get sick. But I could really go crazy, and I must be going crazy if all these things are happening with my perception, with my thoughts. I'm so disconnected. This is what crazy feels like, right? And you just assign it, and then there's the fear to protect you from that feeling. So you know, it's two parts. It's not even just the derealization. It's not fighting the fear that's attached to it either. You're allowed to feel afraid. So you're allowed to have these weird feelings and these weird thoughts. You're also allowed to feel afraid. And you can use the word just too. I just feel weird, and I'm just feeling afraid right now. Just, it's okay to be afraid. When you're afraid and not in danger, there's nothing to hook that fear to. So we hook it to all different types of discomfort, all ideas of danger, of what we associate with that, like, present discomfort. So it's like, let go of the fight of that fear too.
Yeah. And we're going to move on and talk about intrusive thoughts now in a moment. But I think there is, I think what makes it so difficult for people is that thing you said, Aida, of going to the core of who you are with depersonalization, derealization. It's like for me personally, it's, if I felt something physical, it almost feels a little bit removed from me. So it's like I can kind of deal with it in the body, but once it goes into the mind and the fear of losing your mind, there's nowhere else to seek refuge. There's nowhere else to run. It's like the attackers are inside now, or the enemy is inside the gate. And there's nowhere to feel safe. There's nowhere to rest. There's no comfort. And then of course you think, my life will always be like this. I'll always be in this state of deep unease. And I think that's what really makes people so, not traumatized, but so frightened of this sensation and these symptoms.
Yeah, and I really think, and the message is, go get help, go join Dare Advanced, or seek out to a Dare buddy, or book a session with a coach, a therapist who can help you through that, because it tends to become chronic. Like if you spiral more and more down, more and more down. And what you just said, Barry, this, I'm becoming my own enemy, and I can't see it. I can't really explain it. And this belief creeps in, nobody can help me. Nobody can help me. Like if I have something in my heart, I can go to a cardiologist. There's maybe a machine, who can make my heart beat, but not my mind. Right? It's the first and the last instance, so to speak. So yeah. And one last thing I wanted to touch on, because somebody asked, what often happens is there is the sensation, and then people, they become so afraid of that sensation, but actually that sensation is not the problem itself anymore, but it starts to become this intrusive thought. It morphs into some different ideas. And then it's like, okay, am I really not wanting to feel my emotions? Am I still feeling derealized or depersonalized because of that? Or am I just afraid of the thought of becoming depersonalized? And I get these questions often. So all I want to say with that, it's the same thing. It's the same technique, how you work with that. You acknowledge it as an anxious thought, an intrusive thought, just a sensation. No fight. No fight.
Yeah, no, you're right to bring it up, because it's like it morphs over into like existential anxiety, connects senses of reality very strongly, because you start questioning, who am I? Why am I here? What's the nature of life? Is there a God? What happens when we die? So it kind of just spirals into more and more kind of unanswerables, things
unanswerable. Yes, definitely. And I think, and people like they try to find answers to those, and they just can't find it, or they find different answers. Somebody tells them this, and then they get another answer, and they get even more confused, and they get more helpless and hopeless that this will be over. And it's almost like kind of like an OCD intrusive thing, depersonalization mixture of stuff. But yeah.
And the other thing I want to make sure people get, it's not like it's the top of anxiety, like, oh, I had some anxiety and now I have physical sensations and it's worse. And now I have intrusive thoughts and derealizations and it's even worse. And then I'm going to go crazy. It's not like it's work your way up the pole. It's all the same feel. It's just another sensation to fight. So I know people think like, oh my gosh, now I have the thoughts. Now I have thoughts and heart palpitation. Oh, well, what if I get depressed? Now I have these thoughts and I'm disconnected, and then I'm disconnected and I don't know what I'm doing. Blah, 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 blah. We're fighting it as if it's like going up notches at a time. No, but I think people only perceive it that way because that's the stuff you fight. The stuff you fight the hardest is where the anxiety is the most. So you might not really care as much about stomach things, but I really care about going crazy. That just happens to be what you're fighting the most. It's not like, oh, now I'm having this feeling, I'm stuck even deeper. And Aida, you made like a great point. If you don't find a therapist that gets it, right? It's almost like it's such a disservice to show up and say, wow, I feel like I'm about to lose it. And then the therapist is like, whoa, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. I've never seen anything like this before. Let's try and calm down. How do you feel now? Let's use some coping mechanisms. Let's breathe. How do you feel? You're like, I feel fucking crazy. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, and it's almost like the therapist is saying, and let's hope by you relaxing, this doesn't come back.
And it goes away, right?
If you say to somebody, I hope this doesn't come back, or let's do this to not make this come back, then it's coming back.
Right.
And
go ahead.
I think people, Aida. No, I think people should connect with therapists like the two of you to talk through it if it's really becoming an issue for you, because sometimes you need to get on the phone with people and just talk it out. It's not enough to read it in a book or listen to an audio. Sometimes you just need another person to say, no, that is normal, Aida.
And what I wanted to state loudly, people, derealization and depersonalization comes from the emotional realm, not from the mental realm. It is not, I repeat, it is not a sign that you are going into psychosis, developing schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, or anything like that. Just to be clear, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, psychosis, they all have something in common. And this is that at some point, their reality check is not intact anymore, right? The reality test. Yours is, you know, you are feeling strange. You can observe that, oh my God, this feels so weird, like my perception, like I feel only my head, what is my body, blah. You know that you are asking yourself those questions. So this is for you, your evidence and your proof that you are not going crazy. Right. And if you haven't gone crazy until now, with all the DP and DR you felt, you won't. Just like try to remember that whenever these thoughts of, oh, am I going crazy? Am I going to psychosis come up? It will not happen.
Good point. And before we finish on this, I think I also wanted to say, so you've got the cognitive or mental approach of dare that you use when you've got this issue, but it's also really important to just be in life. So in your head, you've kind of got this acceptance and allowance going on. Yeah. You do also need to be living in life. And by that, I mean getting outside, exercising, being in fresh air, getting lots of rest. All of those things will just help to ground you in the present moment again, because you're so head heavy with this sensation. It's so important to just kind of connect with your body again, connect with nature. That'll just help to shift out of that unpleasant feeling faster.
Right. And now, however long this video is going to be posted, throw in the fact that we're recording this in 2020, when a lot of people's schedules are thrown off. You're home a lot. So there's nothing else to pay attention to but yourself. There's a lot of Zoom calls. Be aware that when you're staring at that screen all day, I feel this way. It starts kind of feeling weird. You feel almost tunnel vision. You feel a little spacey, a little lightheaded. It's just, there's physical things that happen too, but it's like when we attach that fear to it, like, oh, I'm feeling derealization again. Too many Zoom calls, can't do the Zoom calls, right? It's letting go of the fight of all of those things. So yeah, getting outside, like shifting your focus, connecting to people, even if it doesn't feel connected. The goal with all of this, whether it's derealization or whatever we talk about next, is irrelevance, not elimination. It doesn't matter that I don't like how I feel. Yeah, I feel scared and I don't like this feeling, but I don't need to sit and stare at it and attend to it, because the more I stare at it, the more I see it. So I'm going to notice it and then engage, right? I can engage in that feeling all day long and say, is it gone yet? Is it gone yet? Is it gone yet? Or I can engage in life and give it a nod and say, yeah, there's that feeling. I can have that feeling while I'm going out to the store. I can have that feeling while I'm doing chores around the house, like unimportance rather than like elimination.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. So let's move on to and talk about intrusive thoughts. I'll tell you how I used to experience them first. Mine were, I think the first time it was maybe I was standing on a balcony or something like that. It was the idea of, it was just hearing the thought jump. That was it. And it was like, where did that come from? You know, why would I think that thought? Isn't that shocking? Is that something I might act on? And then it would also manifest when driving, be driving on a busy road. And the thought would just come into me, swerve into oncoming traffic or something like that. And it's that what if, what if I did this? What would happen? What if I act on these little impulses of thoughts, these flashes of awareness that are coming into my mind? And that causes massive, massive anxiety, because you question who you are, you question if you have control over your own being, over your own mind. And it's back to that core fear we're talking about, the fear of losing control, of losing your mind. And then it's, what if I get locked up? What if people think I'm a loony? All of that stuff just spirals and spirals and makes you more anxious. And of course, with the anxiety comes more and more of those thoughts. So how have you guys heard about it? How do you, on the calls and your one-to-ones, how do people talk about it? Aida, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I experienced in my one-to-one calls that the higher the anxiety, the more intrusive thoughts there are. The higher depersonalization, the more intrusive thoughts. And I think it's always funny how a feeling can cause matching thoughts. For example, as we talked before, we have, okay, I feel disconnected. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, what if? Why do my hands feel weird? Why does this feel? Why am I even seeing? It feels like I'm staring out of a balcony inside of my head. So we have a feeling and we have matching thoughts. It's always like that. It doesn't matter in which area, but they always connect. Sometimes it's a thought that creates a feeling, or vice versa. But intrusive thoughts, I've had all varieties of them in my coaching, from sexual sexual doubts about sexual orientation, lots and lots of harm thoughts, like harming oneself, harming other people. And it never ceases to amaze me how much people are shocked by their own thoughts. And I understand on one hand, but it's just interesting to see how we as humans can become so deeply fused into those thoughts and not have any gap at all. And we take them for granted, and then we again assign meaning to them. And then we create this myth around them. We're like, okay, this means I'm going to act on them. This means I am a pervert. This means I could harm someone. And it's always
love someone.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Or for example, religious intrusive thoughts that revolve around religion. If someone has strong upbringings, like being Catholic, then they're most likely are going to have thoughts about, blasphemia or something. If people are usually very kind and gentle and loving towards other people, they are going to have intrusive thoughts about harming them and so on. Or people who are very much in control, they're going to have thoughts like jumping off a balcony or screaming in public. This is a common one too, like standing in line and spontaneously shouting out something crazy. And I'm laughing because at the moment I don't have intrusive thoughts. I know what they are, but I clearly and vividly remember when I had them, how they felt. It was like, a bug to the stomach. It was so awful. Like I I had no blood in my face anymore. I was so scared. I was sitting at the table and my husband was like, "What's wrong with you?" I was like, I don't know. I was afraid to pick up a knife. It got so intense. So I totally understand.
I do, when you say that, I do get intrusive thoughts, but there's just no emotional fear attached to them. So I'll still have weird thoughts, but it's just kind of like it's content now. It's just content passing, in my consciousness. And it is like, oh my God, I'm a bad person for thinking that.
Yeah. Do you have any example of an intrusive thought? You had something weird or funny that crossed your mind?
Me?
Yeah.
Well, it's funny, when I was thinking, just talking there, actually my very first intrusive thoughts were blasphemous thoughts. And it was around sexuality and religion. I was a teenager, and this is kind of before I ever had my first panic attack. I think I was 13, 14 maybe. And just having those thoughts and then dealing with the Catholic guilt of having those thoughts. And that really set me off.
But do you have I think we have a daily dare where we say, like, imagine you're watching a movie and like a crime movie, and you see somebody killing one of their siblings. And let's say I have a sister, and I'm like, well, what if I were to kill my sister? Well, I actually hate her. Look at what she did to me at the last family dinner. How would I kill her? With a knife or with a gun? But you then quickly realize that it's just a thought. You don't get hooked up by it, right? You're like, okay, that's stupid. And you just let it go. But what happens, what Michelle said before, you like, oh, I had this thought. Oh my God, what does that mean? Right? And then you try to push it away. And the more there is at stake, the higher the glue factor is going to be. Like, you're not worried about, I don't know, an apple or crashing a glass of water or something, because you don't care. But if it's about, like, I don't know, killing, yeah, definitely. Yeah. And the harder we push, the harder they bounce back.
Right. And I love, weirdly enough, talking about intrusive thoughts, because I notice all these thoughts in my head. I have a very busy brain. But again, that was never my thing. I just noticed them as like, oh, look at that. And I know a lot of people have heard me say on a lot of the group calls, I don't even like the term intrusive thoughts. I hate it. Whoever came up with it, because if you label something as an intruder, when you ever accept and allow an intruder in your home, like, oh, hello, like robbers, I'm going to dare you, like, come on in, I accept and allow. No, anything that's intruding in you, your automatic reaction is to get out of here, go away. So they're not intrusive thoughts. I mean, well, I only call them that because that's what people know them as. They're really just spontaneous thoughts that you don't like. Because we have spontaneous thoughts that we do like, but nobody gives a shit about them. Nobody calls me for, like, and this is my go-to example, always on the call. Nobody's like, Michelle, out of the blue, I was just cooking dinner, and I don't know why, but I saw like a couple dollars on the counter, and I was like, oh my gosh, what if I hit the lottery? And oh, what if I get all this money and I'm like a millionaire? And I can't stop thinking about, oh my gosh, should I buy a car? Should I buy a boat? Should I buy another house? Like all day long. And I feel like I should talk to a therapist about this, because that thought came up out of nowhere. I don't know. No, everybody likes those things. Those are fantasies. Those are things we have, that thought, that spontaneous thought where I'm like, oh, give me more of those. I like those. There's no fight. So there's no like resistance, but it's like same thing, like the knife in the kitchen, that's like everybody's favorite go-to. It's like a messed up game of Clue, it's like the spouse in the kitchen, always tomatoes, cutting tomatoes, and then it's, oh, I could just, either it's like one of those felt like stab or kill, like you just hear the word or see the word, or it's like I could just, and then you picture, because we have very vivid imaginations and we think in such descriptive details, and you can almost see the scene, right? So you have a thought of, I could just stab my husband, I could just chop this guy up, I could just, or what if, or I just picture the scene. That's just a thought. It really is just a thought. That's not a problem. Our problem happens when we go, and when we attend to thoughts as if it's present danger. So it's, why would I think that thought? I must want to do that if I thought it, because why else would I think it? I saw that one guy on the news, like he did it and he seemed fine. I seemed fine. And then here comes the fear. And then it's hide the knives, hide the, well, that's something else. That's a pen. A pen is pointy. Hide the pens too. Hide everything. Keep everything away from me, just in case, because I'm imagining danger, and now you're attending to imagine danger the same way you attend to danger. So now we start fighting. What's really happening is we're fighting our own imagination, whether it's imagined, whatever it is. And people like to describe these, don't like it, but describe it in such detail, because it's like, no, Michelle, let me tell you how violent these thoughts are. It's about my babies, my children, it's sex, it's violence, it's death, it's all the things we like. I really don't want that to happen. And it's this, it's noticing a thought I don't like, right? And then I push it away. The problem is the push, not the thought. It doesn't matter what the thought is. Like where our problems are is the push.
Yeah, exactly. We scare ourselves to death with this content. But like, think about it. If you're a person who's never had intrusive thoughts before, it's just never been crept across your consciousness. You can see why it's so shocking. If you've lived a certain life in a certain way, never thought in that direction, never kind of had those ideas, and then suddenly you have one. All it takes is one, and then you get so scared by that one thought, and you're off to the races. Right. And it's just boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
And it's like that fear of being taken over, or you've lost sense of control. The other thing I was going to say, when you were talking about why don't we think of good thoughts? What if I win the lotto? It's like our ancestors never had those thoughts, and we are the descendants of worried people. It's through biology, right. Those who look out for danger did better in general. And we are all descendants of those people who were a little more kind of on the alert, on the lookout for things. The chilled out, relaxed cavemen probably got eaten up, and their genes with them.
Plus, I would also say, like, it's not like I just had an intrusive thought for the first time. It's more like I just noticed one, because we all have them. But like you were saying, like you might have had one as like a teenager, as a kid, but they just sort of go under the radar. So it's not. That's why it's not the thought. Like here, I have my little. See all these? These are all the things we like to fight, right? Things kind of about those things: sex, sexuality, violence, going crazy, what ifs, religion, memories. We fight all different things. We fight memories from the past. We love fighting what ifs of the future. And we fight any scary thing that pops up. This is not your problem. These are ideas of problems. These are ideas of danger. The problem, okay, is when we take this light. So like if I showed you back here and it was kind of dark, you wouldn't see it so much. What happens is, like, we get into this sensitized state. And if you're a higher alert, you're noticing more things. It's kind of like looking into the ocean, right? You only see the fish floating on top. And then you get a big spotlight and you can just see a little further down and you're like, the fuck is that stuff swimming in that ocean? That's scary. That's creepy. Like, look what just showed up in my ocean. No, that was in your ocean all this time. You just noticed it. So when the lights get a little brighter, you just notice more things. So it's not this, it's this. And some people are shining a light on, oh, well, how am I thinking? But tell me about this violent thought. And then the more you focus on violence, the more you only see violence and violence. And it's like, it seems so important. They're just shitty thoughts. It's this, it's the light and the focus and the attention you shine on it, because you're fighting health anxiety. You're fighting the idea of what if I get sick, the same way you would be fighting an emergency right now. Your body just knows you're fighting. So you're attending to thoughts of danger the same way you're attending to danger. And Dare teaches you how not to attend to uncomfortable thoughts as if they're danger. That's what keeps the fear there.
Yeah, and I think a good first step if somebody suffers from intrusive thoughts and don't know how to deal with them is to start just observe the conversation in your head. There is always these three parts. There is the thought. It's going to be like, oh, what if I would kill that dog? Oh, that dog is so cute. I could easily kill him. Right? So, and then there's the other part of you will try to rationalize it and say something like, oh, you would never do that. But that thought is going to come back and say, but you know, all it takes is just one attempt. Maybe. No, you would never. But what if? Now, look, my hands fit perfectly around that little neck. Oh my God, right? It's true. It's true.
It's 100% true. 100% true.
And while we're at it, I highly encourage people to speak them out loud with a therapist, a coach, or somebody who understands intrusive thoughts, not your friends, okay? Not your boss, and certainly not your colleagues, right? But somebody who understands. Speaking them out makes them, like, it lessens the power they have over you. But coming back to that, so you're observing that conversation and you are the observer, the one who observes this, and you are kind of like neutral. And it's important to stay neutral, not to take this side, which is not true, and also not the other side who just wants to shut up the first side because it's also afraid of this content, right? You are neutral. And so you're like, oh, there is this thought. And you allow the adrenaline zaps, because they will happen. The more you're fused, the more you have suppressed the thought and pushed it away, the more effort you have put into pushing it away, the more adrenaline your body will produce as soon as these thoughts pop up. And I think this is something people get really scared about. They're like, I'm observing my thoughts, I'm not reacting on them, but I still feel the zaps, I still feel fear. Yes, and you're going to feel this fear for some time, because you need that practice to diffuse, to distance yourself. In the beginning, you're like, oh, a thought, zap. Oh, a thought, zap. And then you're like, oh, a thought, less zap. Oh, a thought, less zap. And so it continues. And this is the way you eventually, you lose your fear of it. And like, okay, it's just a thought. Maybe it's even a funny thought, right? They can be quite funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so with Dare, that first step, the diffuse step, is one sometimes people get wrong or they struggle with the most, because as you're saying there, Aida, you notice and then you're diffusing them. But where people get caught up is, diffuse is often about so what, whatever. It's that attitude of, it's a dismissive attitude of, I don't really care about the content of this thought because it doesn't scare me. It's very hard to say so what, whatever to a thought that's really intrusive, because it's like, I actually do care if something terrible happened to that person, so the way around that, and this is where people do get caught up, is you don't have to say so what, whatever to the content of the thought, but you can say so what, whatever to anxiety's attempt to scare you. So it's like you're imagining anxiety is there and your ear telling you all the terrible things you could do to that cute little dog, and what you're saying is, you're saying to anxiety, whatever anxiety, I see what you're trying to do here. I see you're trying to scare me with these thoughts, these sensations. And that diffusing of anxiety's attempt to scare you can be a helpful kind of way around where people normally get caught up saying, to me, like saying, I know, but I can't be dismissive of some of these thoughts. They are actually really, You know,
Right.
so you have to be clever in how you diffuse them.
Definitely.
I tell people, sorry, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
Saying for diffuse, I tell people it's like, but I really don't want to go. I don't want to kill my kids. I don't want to do all these, these things. Like I can't accept and allow that. That's the same thing. Like it's hard to diffuse. It's hard to accept. Like all of it doesn't make sense to people when they're using dare the wrong way, right? It's like I tell people you're not diminishing, like you're never gonna like the content of that thought. You're never gonna like it. You're not like, oh, I love the idea of murdering a village of children now. Thanks, Dare. Like it'll always suck. But you're diffusing the fight of a thought. You don't have to fight. Thoughts are not dangerous. And I can't say that enough. Thoughts cannot harm you. Thoughts are not dangerous, right? So you can think of dangerous thoughts. It doesn't mean there's danger. So when I notice the thought, say, wow, that's just a thought, right? If there was actual danger happening in front of you right now, I would never tell anybody to accept and allow, to dismiss it, to get more of it. But if you're thinking about danger, if you're thinking about something, you get to say, and your alarm's like, oh my God, do something. Like, oh, what are you showing me? Oh, a thought? What the hell you want me to do? It's just a thought. Just a thought. It's just a thought of something I don't like. It's a thought of danger. But what's happening right now is I'm having a thought that I don't like. I don't need to fight that. I can notice it. I can give it a nod. And I could, like, it's your alarm, like, goes by what you do. So if you're fighting it, it sends you energy to fight. As long as you keep fighting, it keeps ringing and it keeps shining a light on it. So it's like your job to kind of like train this little puppy. And you're like, oh, that one. Oh, yeah, that is scary. You're right. That's a thought that I don't like. And I feel scared, but that's not actual danger right now. So we can have that thought. That's fine. I can think of a tiger. I can think of 10 tigers. I can think of really scary tigers. It might make me feel more afraid, but I'm in no more danger. So there's nothing to fight. And accept and allow is like I tell people, notice it as like it's kind of going across the movie screen. Like, oh yeah, there's that thought. Oh, there's another thought. And it takes from like the blinders, it kind of helps you move back because there's plenty of other thoughts going on back there. When you just shine a light on the ones you don't like, those are the ones you notice, So it's like, yeah, oh, sure. I'm thinking about some blasphemous thought. Oh, and I'm also thinking about like, what am I going to have for dinner? And what if I like kill my dog and I'm kind of cold? And so it just kind of puts it into the scheme of the other 50,000 thoughts that are floating around in your head too, but we're just not focused on them.
And let's not forget that to actually have a fearful reaction to these thoughts is a very normal, and it's kind of the proper response that you are upset by these thoughts. I mean, you probably should be worried if you're not upset by some of these thoughts and it's all good fun, you like the content. So, the very, very fact that people get so upset shows how normal they are, how sane and grounded they are.
So Freud, call him what you will, he's a little bit of a, but the ego dystonic and ego syntonic came from him, and ego dystonic is like thoughts that kind of go against your values. So of course, when it's, oh my gosh, oh, what if I kill myself? I don't want to kill myself. Of course, yes, you don't want to. That's why it scares you, because you don't like that thought. It's ego dystonic. It's going against your grain. It's going against your values. Ego syntonic are things that go with your values. So it makes sense that somebody who is very religious and spiritual person, right? If suddenly you have a thought of, what if there's no God? That's ego dystonic for you. And somebody else who might not have a strong belief in anything, they might have that thought, but they don't care about that thought because it doesn't matter to them. And I want to add one more thing, because this comes up a lot on my calls too. Like Barry, what you were saying, it is normal to be like, ugh, like cringe a little bit, like, oh, that would be, oh, Michelle, how could you think such a thing, right? Oh, my baby's sleeping so quietly, and here come all the thoughts, and you're like, that's great. That means you don't want that to happen. So what comes next? And Aida, I don't know if you've gotten people like that say the next step, it's, okay, but now I'm not scared of the, you get this right now, I'm not scared of these thoughts anymore.
Right,
that scares me too. Because now, do I really want to do that?
Yeah.
It's just, do you get that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So often
And people can really overcomplicate things, and I understand, because, you know, they're trying to feel better, they're trying to look for solutions. And I know that this topic is complex, like you can fill books with that, but it's really, it's not necessary, because this is our job, Michelle, and Mary's, and my job to, you know, to know this stuff. But what's important for you is to have a simple technique which you can apply that helps you. And believe it or not, it's the simplest of things that can help you overcome this. And a great exercise I do with all of my clients is I want them to imagine sitting in a room, in the living room or in the office, it doesn't matter. And as soon as they have this thought, I want them to imagine that they're opening the door. They open the door and they allow that thought, imagine it as a monster or whatever you want to imagine it like, and sit it down on a chair, serve it a cup of tea and say, here's the tea, I'm busy. Right? You go back, okay? I don't have time, you can be there, okay, but I don't have time, right? So I'm busy with something. And you go back to what you were doing. But this physical act in your imagination of opening the door takes away the resistance. And it's all about that. It's the difference. What makes just a thought into an unwanted, intrusive thought is your resistance to it. And of course, we could work with, with CBT techniques and try to challenge all your inferences and la la. It works. I'm not saying it doesn't work, but the simplest way, a summary of all of what we learned and try to teach you is stop resisting it. It's only a thought. Right. Know that you are not alone. Sane people have crazy thoughts. Kind people have violent thoughts. Right? People who are happily married have thoughts about betraying their partner, and so on and so on. It does not matter. It's just the resistance trying to keep them out. So invite them in and sit them down somewhere so they can be there. And practicing that is going to take away that resistance, and then those thoughts will lose their grip on you.
Right. And you don't have to prove them wrong, right? When you were saying like thoughts about, what if I don't love my husband anymore? Like I'll have people come on and say that, and they're doing all these things to prove it wrong. No, I love him. No, let me give him a hug. Let's cook dinner. Okay, I'm annoyed with him, but I'm not going to argue with him because that means I don't love him. And let's have sex all the time to show I really, really love my husband. See, do I love him? Do I love him? See, I love him. And like we do all these things to either prove it wrong or prove I'm fine. No, see, I'm not crazy. I'm okay. And Aida, you mentioned that before. Like we get like into this idea of reassurance, like
safety
behavior.
It's
okay. Everything's. You're not going to do that. That sounds nice. And that sounds kind, and you might hear that in like, I've heard that people, I've been to other therapists where you go into the whole, let's go through like, well, you've never harmed anybody before, and what are the odds of doing? You are spending way too much time attending to just some plain old shitty thought. You don't need to prove anything right or wrong. You don't, otherwise that just, your alarm doesn't care either, because your alarm just cares, but what if you do? But what if you lose? Oh, I know you don't want to kill anybody now, Michelle. But what if you lose control and you do? But what if you go crazy and you do? And then you get to say, that's just another thought. That's another thought about that thought. So it's learning how, it's not the content of your thought. I don't really care what your thoughts are. I care which thoughts you're fighting and which thoughts you're applying meaning to. Oh, but Michelle, we need to talk about existential thoughts. Oh, but you never touch on violent thoughts. Oh, you never talk about sexual thoughts. Because I know everybody thinks they're particular and so important. Even if it's, forget all of this stuff. Let's say health anxiety. It's still another what if. What if I get sick? What if I don't love my husband anymore? What if I kill myself? What if? They're all thoughts. And you don't call me unless they're shitty thoughts, because fighting, and it's the fight, it's the light you shine on it and the fight you apply to it, right? Fear helps you fight. So you will keep getting fear as long as you keep fighting. So there's that wind down period. Once you stop fighting, you sort of let your alarm wind itself back down. It like you have to let thoughts fade away, and they fade away when you stop treating them as important. So that's when they start to fade. Not, are they gone yet? Are they gone yet? Are they gone yet? That keeps them important. When you notice them, say, oh, yeah, well, there you are. I could murder my family tonight, or like, I could choose not to, or I could like, well, let's clean up dinner first, because I'm sure not cleaning up this mess. And when you make light of it, like you see, I'm not like trying to belittle how people are feeling, but you want to put it back into place of, I can choose how I respond to my thoughts. I can't choose to have a spontaneous thought or not. I can notice one, but then I choose what I do in response to it. So I can just notice it, give it a nod, let it be there without the fight of it. And that's what lets the fear start to fade.
And let's not forget, on that wind down, as these thoughts are leaving, the sneaky thing anxiety does again is it tries to give you a new thought, a different topic you've never had before. So, you know, your thing was blasphemous thoughts, for example, and then suddenly it throws in something else, curveball, just to almost like test you to see if you really have stopped fearing these thoughts. And that's something people should be aware of, so they don't get caught up in that thinking, oh no, I'm back to square one, or caught up in that terrible setback.
And Barry, one thing you mentioned in the beginning, you said that you had this intrusive thought that almost came like a command, like not what if I jumped, but jump. Did I get that right?
Sometimes it was like that. You know, I can't even remember exactly. Sometimes there could have been the what if before it, you know, so it can be different. Exactly. And another one worth mentioning is sometimes people say, when my mind is very quiet, my thoughts get very loud, and they start thinking that they're hearing voices. That's another one. And then they start fearing, oh my God, I'm hearing voices. So it's all just content. It doesn't really matter what it is, how it comes. It's the content and how you respond to it is the problem, you know. Not
because somebody asked, like, is it different if there's a what if? Like, what if I jump? What if I do that? Or if I almost hear it like, oh, I have this thought that's almost like a command, do this, or swerve into that car, or kill this dog, or you know, something like that. And it doesn't
that scares people more. That does.
Usually the funny thing is that in the beginning, it's mostly, it starts with what if. And the more effort you put into resisting it, the harder they bounce back. And it's like they don't even bother to say what if, just say do it, you know, because you've built up so much resistance. But as you said, there's really no point. It's all the same. The content doesn't matter. And this is what always Michelle says. It doesn't matter what thought it is. It's just that you are fighting this. It could be a variety of things. And one last tip I have for people is, all the people I've talked to, all of them said, my thoughts, I could tell never to somebody. Like, they are especially bad. Like, they are so bad. You haven't heard that one before. I'm like, okay, try me, right? Try me. I've heard a lot of things, so let's see. And I just want you to know that you are not the only one. Like, there's all kind of really perverse, sexual, abusive, violent thoughts, and I'm sure that what you are thinking, somebody else have thought of it before. The normal is insane as people, so really find somebody to talk about it. Know that you're not alone in this, as crippling as they feel, and they don't have to. You can really overcome them, and we are all, and the whole Dear family is proof of that.
Yeah, people are afraid to, like, oh, they're going to take my children away if I'm having thoughts of harming my children. And then you get a good old therapist who doesn't quite get how this works. And it's like, well, you want to harm your children? Do you have a plan to harm your children? And then the client's like, I don't know. That's why I'm here. I don't know. What if I do? And then we're like fighting thoughts. Like I can't tell her what, like, I'm having a thought of, what if I commit suicide? I don't want to commit suicide, but what if I do? That's if it starts with a what if, that's a great sign that it's your alarm showing you an idea of some imagined future. That's all that it is. It's your imagination of the future. And it's always the shittiest version. Like, we do black and white. So we don't fight all the millions of shades of gray. We fight the worst one we can find. We think a thought, and then we fight. And so if we think the scariest thought, we fight that one the most, which makes us notice it the most. They really do not need attending to. Let's pick that apart. How does that make you feel now? And are you still having these thoughts, right? Well, I don't know. Let me go find some. Yep. Yeah, I am. Thanks for reminding, right? And remember, it's not, are they still there? It's okay that they're still there. It's never these things, right? But if you're staring at them like this, that's what's taking up all the space. It's zooming out. Let them be there. But see, when you back up, then they start to float around with all the other thoughts back here. They are unimportant.
Well, thank you, guys. I think this conversation has been really helpful for people, because it's doing that normalization role of letting people know this is very normal, and also that there is hope, that there is an approach people can take to overcome these problems. And Michelle, you were going to say
I
something?
just had the one last, the one what if that I forgot to mention, the one every single person has ever said on any call, because this is the one that scares me the most. Aida, I'm sure you know it. It's what if this lasts forever?
Forever.
Forever! Forever! No matter what it is. Of course, we're talking about DPDR, intrusive thoughts. So that's the theme of this call. But it's whatever it is you're fighting. It's what if this lasts forever? What if this just never goes away and I'm stuck living this life? Like this is not a life to live. And I'm in this perpetual state of anxiety. And what, right? Is this not what you hear?
Absolutely, 100%. Yes, absolutely. And I think, I understand people, I really do, because it's, when they're so consumed and not just their conscious thoughts, but also their automatic thoughts and their body, everything is just like pointing out to anxiety and catastrophe and then everything is so fearful. So it's normal for our brain to project negatively into the future, or to project things that are currently happening. Like if I'm in love and I feel happy, like I'm going to project very positive into the future, because that's the brain's default state, and it's going to do the same thing when we feel anxious and fearful. So I do understand, but also again here, as Michelle said, it is just a thought. And because I believe it could be true, this is why my body reacts to it. But you need to diffuse it then and say, like, let's see what happens. Like, that's a good answer. Let's see what happens. I don't know either. All right. But let's see. But yeah, it's the same process.
Yeah.
And at the end, back to E, engage with life. So
Right.
let's not stay caught up in our heads and connected more with what's going on around us. All the while you're using these techniques, you're still focusing back on life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I tend, like, when I talk to people about that, I tend to cherry pick things that prove that right. It's almost like, yeah, well, I was fine for a few hours, but then that feeling came back again, and see, it is back again. This could last forever. It's gone on for 2 weeks. Like who's to say it's not going to last forever? And I know that's where, and everybody thinks like they're special, that I'm a special case. And I have to tell you, that's the one that scares me the most. Like, yeah, join the club. That's the one that scares everybody the most, because we take the peak of the thing we're fighting the most. And of course, the last thing we want is take the worst I could ever feel right now and fight the idea of what if this lasts forever. So it's almost like, let go of the fight of that thought. And then you start seeing like periods of time where you're like, oh, but I actually didn't feel that way for 12 minutes or for a few hours. And yeah, it pop back up again. But when things start popping up and you stop staring at them, they pop up, they do their thing, and they fade away. We're just really good at freezing time and staring at the things we don't like. Let things pop up, let clouds float by. You don't have to like clouds in the sky. You don't have to sit and stare at them all day long, right? Sit, notice them. Like, all right, well, it is actually a little cloudy outside my window. It's all right, well, it's cloudy. So what? Oh, well, I can still do things like the blue sky or cloudy sky, but I can then engage in life. And the more you practice engaging, the more those thoughts become less important.
Yeah, great. Thank you both. I think it's been really informative. So the resources are out there for people. We've got the Dare book, obviously the Dare app. But I do think if someone's really caught up with this and they want to make a quick recovery with it, or quick progress with it, to reach out to either of you, and they can find you through the website or in the Facebook groups, and maybe arrange a one-to-one call as well. So thank you, guys. And we talk soon.
Thank you. Yeah. Bye.
Bye.